recent findings tell us all kinds of stories, including that July was the hottest month ever recorded in human history. Africa continues to carry the burden of rising temperatures, despite contributing the smallest share of global greenhouse gas emissions. We cannot just keep talking about it without doing what is required to fix the problem. This is unfair, but in the long run, playing the blame game is not the answer. A more pragmatic approach is for Africa to be a key player in the search for global climate solutions. Africa stands united and should remain so in this and in its position. In this regard, allow me to take this opportunity to commend President Dr. William Ruto for his exceptional leadership of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change. In Rwanda, we want the private sector to play a greater role in building a green economy. Our strategy is to position ourselves as an attractive destination for international climate financing and investment. That's why the COP27, at that summit, Rwanda launched Ireme Invest, a green investment facility created by the Rwanda Green Fund in partnership with the Development Bank of Rwanda. So far, more than 200 million has been mobilized, US dollars that is, from domestic and international partners, including the European Investment Bank and the Green Climate Fund. We have also been working closely with the International Monetary Fund as a participant in the Resilient and Sustainability Trust. We have access to long-term financing to further integrate climate into our economic policies. This is a good sign that the international community is taking seriously the call to reform our global financial architecture. But there is still room for improvement. In this context, I welcome the discussions held at the Paris Summit for a new global financial pact. The Bridgetown Initiative, spearheaded by Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados, also deserves consideration and serious attention. Any meaningful structural change must favor debt restructuring and lower interest rates, as President William Ruto has so eloquently explained. As chair in office of the Commonwealth, Rwanda supports the development of a multidimensional vulnerability index led by the United Nations in partnership with the small island developing states. Gross national income, GNI, does not accurately measure a country's vulnerability to climate change. In any case, small islands and developing states should not be penalized for having higher income levels. Ultimately, what Africa wants is fair and equal partnership, which takes our priorities into account. That is going to be the basis for trust and solidarity. I hope this summit will serve as a good foundation for discussions later in this year at COP28. I thank you for your kind attention, and Mr. President, thank you for convening us here.
Round of applause for President Paul Kagame. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now is the opportunity for President Salva Kiir, the President of South Sudan, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Bana ba Kenya namugezenti mulembe gundi kwaya mumbe kama rumwezera ko bulayi bwo kubanenda kama tunda ko buru mu Kenya.
Your Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Chairman of the Committee of African Governments on Climate Change, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, Your Excellency John Kerry, United States Climate Change Envoy, Your Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber, COP28 President Designate and the UAE Special Envoy for Climate Change, Honorable Ministers for Climate Change, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me start my remarks by expressing my deepest gratitude to the government and the people of Kenya for the warm welcome and for successfully hosting this first Africa Climate Change Summit. Excellencies, the biggest threat faced by humanity today is climate change. It is a threat whose effects are felt by all. But its causes have their roots in the action of a few. Take Africa for instance. We collectively emit less than 5% of carbon, but we are the most vulnerable region. My country, South Sudan, with tiny emissions, for example, is currently experiencing floods, droughts, heat waves, and irregular rain patterns. We have over 2 million people who have lost their livelihoods as a result of climate change and are in dire need of support. In the face of this reality, we cannot continue to lament about the impact of climate change, nor continue to wait for the financial support that has been promised but not delivered. We must seize this opportunity given to us by this African Climate Summit to come up with additional ways to address the impact of climate change. Why am I calling for additional measures? The reason is very clear. The $100 billion that was pledged at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP15, in 2009, has not been delivered. More importantly, that amount is not enough because Africa alone requires over $3 trillion to enable, mitigate, and adapt to the climate change. As Africans, we need to understand that transitioning to low carbon economy will come from within, and its path lies in operationalizing the theme of this summit, driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the well. This is the way to go. Driving green growth will allow us to come up with solutions that will address the financial gap between what was pledged in Copenhagen summit in 2009 and the actual figure needed by African countries to combat climate change. Excellencies, in South Sudan, we are endowed with the natural resources, and the challenges we face as a country are about finding ways to exploit these resources in a sustainable manner. The key question we have always is how do we responsibly exploit these resources in ways that contribute towards mitigation and adaptation to the impact of climate change. Part of our answer to these challenges lie in aligning our climate change policy with climate action plan that cuts emissions and adapt to climate impact. Presently, South Sudan has developed its second nationally determined contributions with the goal of generating 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy from hydro, solar, with wind, and geothermal gas. This to us is the path to net zero carbon by 2050. On top of this planned path, we aim to embark on climate-smart agriculture to meet our food needs. Apart from changing how we plan our development to mitigate the impact of climate change, we also have a vast potential in carbon trading that can generate further revenue to finance our climate adaptation. Our natural forests and the Sud wetlands have the largest capacity to absorb carbon in the world. In fact, I'm proud to say that the Sud wetland in my country is the third long of the world. These ecosystems can sequester millions of tons of carbon dioxide annually, and in them lies the potential for carbon trading I just mentioned. Excellencies, what I have enumerated are steps we can take individually as countries to reverse the impact of climate change. However, we in the global south expect developed countries to play their part, first by cutting their emissions by over 45%, and second, by living their commitment that was made in 2009 in Copenhagen to finance climate adaptation in developing countries. We cannot meet the target of maintaining the temperature rise to 1.5 Celsius by 2030. If the developed countries fail to meet their commitments, both in providing resources to assist with climate adaptation and leading the way in cutting their own emissions. Once again, I congratulate Kenya for successfully organizing the first Africa Climate Summit. I hope that all of us will speak with one voice at COP28 in Dubai. The time for climate action is now. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let's give a round of applause to President Salva Kiir. Let me now take this opportunity to request President Macky Sall, the President of Senegal, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President William Ruto, dear brother, chers collègues, chef d'État.
Dear colleagues, Head of State and Government, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mr. Current Chairman of the African Union, Heads of Delegation, Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants. I thank you, President Ruto, for your kind invitation and the brotherly welcome accorded to us and for the invitation to this first Africa Climate Summit. I want to congratulate you on your leadership and as has been demonstrated in your very powerful statement this morning. The time is ripe for taking stock of the implementation of the commitments on climate and also to agree on an African common position. Everybody knows the risks and dangers related to global warming that continue to affect our countries, and worse still, they have even worsened. The last report of IPCC confirmed that the African countries will be the most impacted by climate change, while they contribute less than 4% of global warming. Africa, we must say, reacts in line with its measures, in line with its means, through innovative and the search for solutions or decarbonization and also the climate change. At the global level, 11 Sahel-Saharan countries execute the project of the Great Green Wall for a decade now. On that score, Senegal implements a reforestation program of 500,000 hectares of indigenous forests, and in order to stop the encroachment of the desert and restore, rehabilitate soil, the biodiversity, and support the pastoral activities. We pursue our efforts to, in fact, execute the carbon resilient projects, and particularly as regards energy transition. And thanks to the implementation of our mixed energy programs, renewable energy represents today 31% of our electricity installed capacity, and part of it is from solar energy, and the other components come from wind and hydroelectric power. We at present implement an important program of rural electrification of more than 1,000 villages, financed at the cost of 75 million euros, together with the Green Climate Fund and also with the West African Bank. These efforts will be strengthened thanks to the strategy. That is, we need to agree, and we cannot prevent Africa from using its domestic energy sources. We, in this transitional phase, ensure that the solutions, African solutions, be over in carbon and also be resilient, and obviously for those who pollute more or less than 3%, that energy transition be abandoned. It will be, in fact, another injustice to Africa. For us, gas is an energy transition, and our policy in energy transition towards zero, net zero, is on the transport system with a regional express train, which is operational for 2 years now, which carry more than 130,000 people every day, which obviously is electric, and also the rapid electric bus, and which obviously will be used before the end of the year. In the same spirit, Senegal signed last June with the partners of G7 its program for an energy transition, which is based on JEPI, with an investment that requires the mobilization of 2.7 million euros. And we have the ambition of raising it to 40% of renewable energy in our energy mix by 2030. Having said that, we have to agree that essentially the African countries should realize and implement their green program, and Mr. President, you have reminded us about it, while the financing of adaptation should be supported by at least by concessional credits in conformity with the what was agreed in Paris. In the perspective of COP28, we should pursue our advocacy for the mobilization of resources dedicated to green financing. That is the key to resolve the problem of climate change and global warming through responsible and interdependent efforts of countries from developing countries. To conclude, I want to express my support to the Alliance for Green Infrastructure initiated by the African Development Bank, the African Union, and Africa 50 in order to support the execution of the projects that are carbon sober and that are resilient. And I want to invite all the partners to contribute to this initiative. And finally, I thank the Central Adaptation Center in its work of promotion of the program to accelerate adaptation in Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause for President Macky Sall, please. Now it's the opportunity for President Jacinto Felipe Nyusi, the President of Mozambique, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ruto, for this opportunity. Your Excellency William Ruto, President of Kenya, Your Excellency Azar Usman, President of Comoros and the Chair at the AU, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Excellency Moussa Faki from the AU Commission, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to commend the invitation of Your Excellency President Ruto and the warm welcome and the invitation to participate in the Africa Climate Summit hosted by the Kenyan government together with the AU Commission. Your Excellencies, the decision by the African Union General Assembly to host this event is in order to have a shared African vision regarding the climate crisis that is affecting the world and mostly Mozambique, Africa. And looking specifically at Mozambique, the country is cyclically ravaged by the impacts of climate change. It's not what I've heard about. This is what we live. And as of February every year, and even until May, we suffer from the adverse effects of climate change. Since 2019, we have suffered from the cyclones Idai, Dineo, Freddy, amongst others. We had many natural storms and drought. Cyclone Freddy was extraordinary because it took longer time, more than 14 days, and we were affected twice by Cyclone Freddy because first affected us on the coast and then went back, and then it affected again Mozambique on its pathway to Malawi. We know that such disasters affect negatively populations in Mozambique, not only, but in other countries. Your Excellency, Your President, the interventions that we've heard were exhaustive. Such statements try to explain what is climate change and what are the impacts of climate change. So I'll not be repetitive, and I would like to be more objective and straightforward by sharing the experience of Mozambique with regard to climate change, prevention, mitigation, and adaptation, and to emphasize the following. First, the conservation areas. 25% of the Mozambican territory is covered by parks, reserves, game parks, including marine protection areas. In this perspective, different actions were endeavored by the Mozambican government together with private partners and local communities in protecting these areas that have led to the reduction of poaching of rhinos, lions, as well as illegal logging. So why am I referring to cooperation of communities? Because very often we just talk at a high level, but those that are living those realities with the nature is communities. So they have to be collaborating with us in order to protect what are their livelihoods. I've also spoken about elephants. You know that the best gardener in the forest is the animal, specifically elephant, meaning that if we do not protect, for example, our animals, our gardens and our forests can be threatened seriously. Secondly, Mozambique hosts the most extensive Miombe forest, which is the largest ecosystemic system in the world, and it extends for more than 2,564 kilometers throughout the Zambezi Basin. As a way of protecting the Zambezi Basin that covers 8 countries from Southern Africa, last year we have held the regional conference under the leitmotif towards an integrated and sustainable management of Miombo, towards resilience to climate change and protection of the Great Zambezi. Thirdly, in Mozambique, the disaster risk management is governed by law, whereby it sets forth an integrated disaster risk management reduction, sustainable recovery of human resiliency, as well as infrastructural resiliency, ecosystemic resiliency, and climate change adaptation. I would like to emphasize that, for example, for each construction work that occurs in Mozambique, they have to comply with the law in order to be considered as resilient construction works. Fourth, we have created disaster risk insurance in order to cater for situations of natural disasters and support of vulnerable groups. One of the efforts towards disaster risk management and reduction is by engaging local communities, as also referred, but we are also prioritizing conservation agriculture. This is relevant in our strategy towards food security, and we promote the preservation of soils, soil quality, the preservation of water resources, the prevention of wildfires that led to deforestation and adverse effects from climate change. Moreover, the management of biomass energy, considering that our rural communities greatly rely on firewood. So we have been expanding rural electrification based on our national grid from the Cabora Bassa Dam and solar grids within the initiative Energy for All. Besides expanding the Cabora Bassa Dam that serves up some of the countries in Southern Africa, we are also prioritizing some hydroelectric projects such as Pandankua, as well as the Ntemani gas plant. And Ntemani will have around 400 megawatts, it will be the major one. 8, we have the territorial planning project. Through the territorial development and spatial planning. And this occurs because very often we see that people just build irregularly, and if we do not plan how we are going to build our urban spaces, we can lead or contribute towards erosion. Another aspect has to do with institutional and legal reforms based on the protection of biodiversity, including the reactivation of the main fines, and meaning that we have severed fines and penalties against poaching, related to poaching, as well as illegal logging. As a result of these institutional and legal reforms, Mozambique has been considered in the carbon credits, and Mozambique is the first African country to receive payments from the World Bank related to carbon trade. By strengthening the early warning system, we have implemented the program One District, One Weather Center. I'm just emphasizing what we're doing as a country because we cyclically suffer from adverse weather effects. So we have decided to strengthen our early warning systems so that communities are ready when those disasters strike us. This year we have also inaugurated the Beira meteorology radar in the central part of our country in order to detect cyclones in a radius of 400 kilometers, and we are planning on setting up 2 additional radars in the northern and southern part of the country. Hence, we will be covering the whole country. We also adopted the Maputo Declaration regarding the integrated early warning system that fits into the national operational and strategic goals. We would also like to share that Mozambique also hosts the the SADC Humanitarian Operation Center, which is a center aiming at protection and prevention. Mozambique has an extensive coastline of around 2,700 kilometers, meaning that we should give special attention to the ocean as the regulator of temperature and climate in the planet. We have ratified the Marpol Convention of 1978 regarding sea pollution that also complements the national legislation regarding illegal fishing and the protection of marine diversity, meaning that if we do not protect our biodiversity, we are going to contribute towards negative impact of the environment, especially the oceans. Your Excellency, before I conclude, Your Excellency Ruto, I would like to show my appreciation for this initiative, and we also would like to exhort all the leaders here to subscribe as a single voice the Nairobi Declaration regarding climate change, and shall we have a collective action towards it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause again for President Nyusi. Let me now take this opportunity to give the floor to President Nana Akufo-Addo, the President of Ghana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
President Ruto, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I join other speakers in applauding the Kenyan President, our host, President William Ruto, for his initiative in convening this summit, and thank him for his hospitality. A summit to define a common African position towards the deliberations of COP28 in Dubai is a highly commendable one, especially if it can help us define how we can mobilize our own resources to address this critical issue of climate change. Ghana's nationally determined contributions towards combating climate change have been fully incorporated into government's coordinated program for economic and social development policies to facilitate their implementation. We have introduced major policy interventions that have development and climate projection imperatives. Our flagship programs, whether they are the programs for planting for food and jobs, or one village, one dam, or one district, one factory, are all geared towards boosting industrialization and rural development, as well as building our resilience to the impacts of climate change. The strategic focus of the One Village, One Dam initiative, for example, in the northern regions of our country, is to provide all year-round access to water to smallholder farmers who practically have no viable livelihood alternatives during the long dry seasons. We're also determined to make natural gas, which we have in abundance, available for the generation of electricity. We placed a ban on illegal mining, the phenomenon we call galamsey, which was destroying our water bodies, vegetation, and our forests. Some 20,000 young people have been engaged to plant more than 30 million trees in 2 years to create jobs and restore degraded land. These policy initiatives are already using positive results to the attainment of the SDG goals, particularly the goal of reducing our carbon emissions. Additionally, I have established an advisory group of prominent private sector chief executives who are setting up a $100 million SDGs delivery fund and a $200 million green fund to complement government's efforts at tackling climate change and funding the implementation of the SDGs. Whilst we strive to do our bit to halt climate change at the national level, we expect also a lot to be done at the international level. One major issue of concern to us is the need to streamline access to international climate finance to complement national funding. I believe this forum will throw more light on practical ways to mobilize financial resources to support the implementation of national climate actions, especially how we can guarantee a different future from the past and ensure that the commitments of the developed world towards climate finance, which have not been met in the past, will be met in the future. Excellencies, it is obvious that we have to act swiftly and decisively to mitigate these effects and ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. The impact of climate change, as we know, is not limited to the African continent alone. It is a global issue that affects all of us. Thus, addressing climate change in Africa, as President Ruto so forcefully articulated, is a moral and strategic necessity for global climate action. Hopefully, COP28 in Dubai will provide us a concrete roadmap towards that end and ensure a just energy transition for us in Africa. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause again for President Nana. Let me now take this opportunity to ask my sister, the President of Tanzania, President Suluhu Hassan, to make her statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Chair of the African Committee of Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, Excellencies, Heads of State and Governments, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, thank you very much for being a gracious host of this August Assembly that sets the tone of Africa's growth now and the future. I thank the government and the people of Kenya for the excellent preparation of the summit and the warm reception accorded to me and my delegation. The convening of this important summit is both timely and opportune, as the theme, driving green growth and climate finance solution for Africa and the world, is quite befitting, especially now ahead of COP28, where parties will take stock of our efforts to address the climate crisis and commitment to address both climate crisis in the context of the Paris Agreement and the Climate Convention itself. Excellencies, the stakes are high and actions have to take place not tomorrow, but today and literally now. As Africans, we have no choice but to seize the moment to capitalize on its potential to offer solutions to green growth and decarbonization, and while creating resilience to its our communities and economies. We can no longer afford to address economic development, climate change, and African poverty burden in isolation. The interplay between development and climate change is undeniable, and this interlink demand integrated and coherent solution that will provide opportunity for socio-economic development of Africa. Excellencies, while the continent is highly impacted by the changing climate, it is nevertheless holding the key to solving the climate challenge. The just released Economic Development in Africa Report 2023 shows the potential of Africa to capture technology-intensive global supply chains, and it said it's all about development of Africa with climate change. It provides a unique insight into Africa's centrality to the green transition that will clearly transform our continent economies. It is said that all metals and minerals that are important and strategic for the low carbon transition are abundantly found in Africa. And these are chromium, lithium, natural graphite, nickel, niobium, rare earth metals, silver, and many more. Given the abundance of these minerals, the continent needs to reposition itself not only as a supplier of raw materials globally, but strengthen the value chains by ensuring their conversion into intermediate and final products is done within the continent. As critical minerals, as they were called critical minerals, they have to make critical contributions to our internal revenue collection and employment creation. They also have to contribute critically in the environmental protection in our countries. So having all these, Africa has to stand firm to use the materials for our own development. Excellencies, human capital dividend in Africa is another force to reckon. To avoid the past mistakes in the history of our continent, we need to focus on human capital advancement by training our own people, especially youth, so as to be able to reap from these vast opportunities. We need to consider the climate crisis as an opportunity to address the youth unemployment challenges. Excellencies, beyond the African potentials, we have potentials in our individual countries. My country, Tanzania, is leading the way by demonstrating strong momentum in driving the green growth. Almost 95% of our energy is from hydro and natural gas. We are also leading in nature conservation with almost 38% of our landmass under conservation in various regimes. We are also committed in nurturing the ecosystems that hold the promise of creating thousands of new jobs and unlimited national economic and global benefits. Talking on the offering of critical mineral to the world, Tanzania has huge deposits of some of these critical minerals needed today. Helium is present around Lake Rukwa Basin, nickel deposit around Lake Victoria, graphite reserves at the southern eastern part of the country, and we also accommodate other deposits, critical minerals, including copper and lithium, as well as rare elements. Despite of the above scenario, we, however, need to face the fact that Tanzania, and indeed the whole of African continent, still faces unprecedented impacts of climate change with limited capacity to finance the mitigation and adaptation needs. And thus, as we head towards COP28, we have to raise an African voice on the establishment of a special establishment and capitalization of a special fund for Africa. The contribution and the pledges which are given by the advanced countries have to say what percentage of those pledges goes to Africa and not just a blanket pledges. As I conclude, and as you are all aware, Tanzania is hosting the AGRIF Food and Agriculture Summit this same week. The presidential summit is on 7th of September, a day after tomorrow. I therefore wish to use this opportunity to once again invite you to Tanzania, and I'll personally be there to welcome you all. Once again, I congratulate you, Mr. President Ruto, for organizing such a successful event, and I look forward to seeing you all in Dar es Salaam. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Another round of applause for President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Now it's my pleasure to request my brother, President Mohamed Yunus Memphi, the President of Libya, to make his remarks. Your Excellency, Mr. President.
Your Excellency, President of Kenya, President William Ruto, and head of the Committee of African Heads of States concerned with climate change. Heads of states, heads of governments, members of the African Union, Mr. Fuka Musa Fiki, head of the African Commission. May I extend my wholeheartedly thanks to President Ruto and the Kenyan people for hosting this very important summit. It is important for Africa and it's important for the whole world. I'd like to congratulate President Ruto for his wise leadership for the African Committee on Climate Change. I value the efforts exerted by the Commission to have a uniformed African stance with regards to all sorts of related matters and all sorts of mutual concerns. Since the inception of the African Union, Africa has always been saying that it should get rid of the historic injustice it's suffering from until now. But we're facing so many risks and challenges imposed by climate change, and it's affecting the whole world. The African Union called on us to work hands in hands, rich and poor, north and south, and to mobilize all our efforts and resources to mitigate those risks and to also adapt to those changes and to change and transform those risks and challenges to opportunities based on strategic partnership to bridge the financing and technical gap, to empower Africa and the South in general to move forward from the weakest link to the high level of being a partner, and this would give more opportunities for adaptation to the whole world. And that would help us to achieve a sustainable horizontal development. We should undertake quick and urgent measures to eliminate any kind of damages or risks that could be irreparable in the future or could threaten life on this planet Earth. We need more solutions. Africa has always been a promising continent. As you can see in this summit, Africa can provide to this planet a lot if our partners are committed to their pledges. This is a good opportunity to deal with the risks in an efficient way, starting with carbon emissions to green growth, green minerals. All those opportunities to provide sustainability and opportunities for energy sources that can be very well used in environment-friendly uses by bridging the technical and bridging the financing gap and the technical gap, and to have different renewables like, for instance, solar energy, wind, and all sorts of other sources. And also, we need to talk about fossil energy. We need to have some kind of harmonized climate initiatives to face climate change and to stand against the individual interests of some of the industrialized countries. The African continent requests are clear in the documents of this meeting and also in the decision of the African meeting that decided on holding this summit before COP28 in Abu Dhabi. And in the draft declaration of our summit, all these texts helps us to have concerted efforts and to stick to our stance and to call on bridging any kind of barriers between us and other industrialized countries, and to draw together the upcoming stage on basis of partnership, seeking one unified goal and according to partnership. Would like to greet our development partners attending today, the international organizations, the private sector, the scientific research centers, the academia, the civil society, women, youth, and also the participants in the Environment Expo. And after the conclusion of this meeting, which is going to be crowned with our declaration representing the unified African stance, we're going to be able to mobilize our efforts, and we're going all to attend and participate in COP28 to defend the outcomes of our summit here in Nairobi. And thank you very much. Thank you, President Ruto.
Your Excellency. A round of applause for President Memphi again. Thank you. Let me now take this opportunity to ask my brother, Julius Bio, the President of Sierra Leone, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, Your Excellency Patricia Scotland, the Secretary General for Commonwealth, Your Excellency First Ladies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm pleased to address this high-level session of the African Climate Summit 2023 under the Kenyan presidency and to reaffirm Sierra Leone's commitment to scale up climate action urgently. I must thank His Excellency President William Ruto and the government of the Republic of Kenya for the excellent arrangements made for this summit as African countries seek to address climate change priorities in this critical decade. From coastal kisses with the Atlantic Ocean to the panoramic vista, from the towering cane of the mountains, the Loma Mountain, to our sprawling national parks, Sierra Leone is a canvas painted with nature's most vibrant hues. Our golden beaches are a testament to nature's artistry. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, if you've not been to Sierra Leone, I'm inviting you to come. However, beneath our nation's beauties lies an unmistakable urgency. With a median age of just over 19 years, our young population, like the other young populations representing Africa's vibrant future, stand at a defining crossroads. Their legacy, and indeed our collective legacy, is shaped by the choices we make today. The seas, once serenading us with gentle lullabies, now one of rising tides that could erase generational achievements. The rains which celebrated our lands now pose a looming threat. Why Sierra Leone is rich with nature's gift. This very geographical splendor renders us vulnerable. Climate change for us isn't a distant shadow. Climate projections in Sierra Leone include temperature increases, extreme weather conditions, intense precipitation, and rising sea levels. Our shores, symbols of natural grandeur, are receding. Many of our communities face displacement, and our pristine beaches risk fading away, and calamities like landslide and floods have become hauntingly regular. The surge in pests and diseases is another testament to our enduring imbalance. Without swift collective action, we risk witnessing the obliteration of Sierra Leone's invaluable ecosystems, leading to further dislocation of our communities and the devastation of their sources of sustenance. This is not just a Sierra Leone story. It is an African story. And I dare say it is a global story too. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our world is in trouble. But our continent is even more so. The evidence is clear. The time for action is now. But we are running out of time. Grounded in this stark reality, my government remains unwavering in our commitment to fortifying climate resilience, ensuring our people thrive sustainably and harmoniously with nature. In our updated nationally determined commitment, Sierra Leone has defined a progressive pathway forward for cutting greenhouse gases emissions from the 2005 levels by 5% by 2025, 10% by 2030, and 25% by 2050. My government is unyieldingly devoted to climate change resilience and adaptation. This includes support for community-based adaptation in agriculture and energy sectors, integrated water resource management, and climate change disaster risk management. We are also poised to improve meteorological services for early warning systems and enhance and protect conservation of natural habitats and ecosystems. Furthermore, our climate change mitigation strategies extend to promoting renewable energy, infrastructure, resilience, and extensive reforestation efforts on at least 960,000 hectares of land. As we engage in country planning, we will also prioritize low carbon screening. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to reaffirm our commitment, we have institutionalized efforts against global menace. This global menace. We have established a dedicated Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and a Climate Change, Renewable Energy and Food Security Presidential Initiative led by Dr. Kande Yomkela. We are designing policies and programs and laying the framework for establishing strong partnerships for funding and implementing projects on major cross-cutting thematic areas of national and global significance. Agriculture is the mainstay of our economy. Recognizing the core importance and extreme vulnerability of agriculture in Sierra Leone, we are focusing on resilience and innovation within this sector, leveraging technology and forward-thinking strategies for climate adaptation. Our overarching aspiration, as enshrined in our National Development Plan, is clear. Achieve food and nutrition security by 2030 through climate-smart practices bolstered by renewable energy throughout the agricultural value chain. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, meaningful inclusion and intergenerational dialogue are crucial to achieving SDG 13, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. In Sierra Leone, we consider our women equal partners for development. We passed the Progressive Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Bill, which guaranteed by law a minimum of 30% representation of women for all appointive and elective positions. My government is committed to promoting the inclusion of women in climate resilience programs and the participation of women in decision-making for climate change adaptation and mitigation governance at all levels. We must harness our demographic dividends on the continent and involve our youthful population in our climate adaptation and mitigation efforts throughout by involving the youth in everything that we do. Sierra Leone's quest for environmental resilience hinges upon our capacity to address climate finance, build local competencies, and refine our legislative blueprints, and etc. Solutions like carbon markets, innovative debt swaps, and novel financial tools such as leveraging our natural resources may be our bridge to surmount the fiscal chasm. Our appeal is clear. Sierra Leone seeks equitable, nimble, and timely access to climate financing. We ask for unbarred access to new climate change adaptation and mitigation technologies and shared knowledge. Our salvation from escalating climate crises lies in collective wisdom and concerted efforts. Another challenge is our institutional prowess in designing programs that attract climate finance is still developing. We yearn for guidance and backing to bolster our legislative architecture, especially concerning forest conservation. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while shared, the responsibility for climate adaptation and mitigation is not and should not be evenly distributed. Expecting countries like Sierra Leone to bear the brunt of a crisis that scarcely contributed to without robust support from the primary emitters, the industrial giants, is fundamentally unjust. Our stance is unequivocal. We are here to collaborate, not to capitulate. We seek cooperation, not charity. The actions of significant polluters must pivot from mere declarations and vague commitments to actionable, technology-driven reparations. It is a demand grounded in the technical feasibility of climate justice, not just its moral imperative. A unified front against the existential crisis is not just desired, it is imperative. As I close, I implore all of us present, the hourglass of action is dwindling, and the sands of time wait for none. Let's come together, not just in spirit, but in action, but in actionable solidarity. For in unity we find just strength, but not just strength, but salvation. Thank you.
Another round of applause for President Bayo. Thank you very much. Now let me take this opportunity to request my sister again, Her Excellency Saleh Work Zewde, the President of Ethiopia. Madam President, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very important summit. Congratulations to the African Union for organizing it, and for Kenya for being our gracious host, as it is in the tradition of this country. Africa has tried its best to make its voice heard. This is not the first time that we meet to do so. In fact, to speak with one voice and to alert partners of the disastrous consequences. Ethiopia has been on the forefront of this fight. A lot has been done to coordinate our efforts in order to have a strong common position. Common position is indeed always needed in our African Union Forum. Today, it's about climate, but the continent's major issues such as peace, stability, progress requires indeed our common position. It has been increasingly difficult to explain to our people, and particularly to our youth, this contradiction. Resource-rich continent and yet poor people. To explain the injustice that has been mentioned many times here today. That is why our summit cannot and should never be a talk show, but a place where concrete actions and actionable actions are being taken. Let me also say that without sufficient research publications, it would be difficult for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to get accurate representation of Africa's special needs and circumstances that would build evidence-based for advancing the key ask of the continent. So it is imperative that as Africa, we prioritize investments in our research capacity to develop scientific publications to inform and guide global efforts to combat climate change. We must emphasize on investing in African research institutions to produce regionally relevant science that can inform the different working groups under the IPCC. This endeavor requires a strong commitment from both African scientists and the international community, accompanied by the financial capacity necessary to deliver this research. Ethiopia has witnessed in the past decades, including the last consecutive years, persistent drought, flooding, locust invasion, where millions were severely affected. We've been carrying out different practical policy and action interventions as a step to contribute to emission removal and building adaptation capacity. Besides, we've also put in place national adaptation plan to build and boost resilience and adaptation capacity. Building climate-resilient green economy is one of the pillars of our 10-year national development plan. As per our strategic consideration, we have launched the long-term low-emission and climate-resilient development strategy that has been submitted to the UNFCCC with the aspiration to achieve net zero emission and building climate-resilient development by 2050. The Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative that has been mentioned again today, that was launched in 2019, has succeeded in planting 25 billion seedlings on the degraded landscapes by mobilizing volunteers throughout the nation. The initiative helped for the development of more than 120 nurseries and created more than 180,000 jobs throughout the country. More importantly, the initiative is intended to inculcate the green behavior in each of our citizens. The greening initiative has been scaled up into fruit-bearing perennial trees, thereby directly linking the initiative with our food system transformation strategy. In the agriculture sector, Ethiopia has achieved notable progress in enhancing its wheat production, effectively transforming a deficit of 15 million metric tons in 2019-2020 into a surplus of 65 million quintals in 2022-23. I think this achievement has enabled Ethiopia to meet not only its domestic need, and in fact commence with exports. This gives me a good opportunity to thank the African Development Bank, and most particularly its president, my young brother, for the support that was given to us. The plan is to cultivate 2 million hectares during the dry season alone in 2023. The success of wheat production is critical for the country's efforts to enhance food security and achieve food sovereignty. In terms of renewable energy production, Ethiopia is also investing on green energy projects such as hydroelectric, wind, solar, and geothermal energy sectors, as well as promoting modern rural cooking technologies. We have successfully run the hydro energy producing projects, including the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, with domestic resources which will significantly make difference in the country's status in terms of social, environmental, and economic needs. Ethiopia is striving to finance climate actions proactively and persistently as means systematically addressing the economic challenges of the country. Accordingly, the government has invested over $82 million from 2011 to 2019, mobilized from domestic, bilateral, multilateral sources, as well as from international climate finance institutions on climate change mitigation and adaptation projects and programs in agriculture, energy, transport, industry, forest, urban development, and health sectors. Despite this investment, Ethiopia still needs to attract and mobilize a significant finance to support its climate-compatible development agenda. We still count on our partners to fulfill their commitments to developing countries and committing themselves for the new challenge of setting new quantified finance goals in the coming years. We also strongly urge multilateral financial institutions to undergo a serious reform that fits for purpose for the needs and circumstances of developing countries, rather than fueling the historical debt accumulated on the shoulders of developing countries and mainly Africa. Our future depends on our decision now. Urgent action is needed in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid worst impact. 8 years after its signature, ensuring the implementation of Paris Agreement is not an option again. As I conclude, I would like to assure you Ethiopia's unwavering commitment to work with our fellow Africans and other global partners to achieve our priorities and the long-term objective of making the planet comfortable for present and future generations. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my dear sister. Another round of applause for President Zewde. Let me now take this opportunity to request Brahim Ghali, the President of Sahrawi Arab Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto, and also head of the Committee of Heads of States on Climate Change, and also head of the AU, and also Mr. Musa Fiki, head of the AC, Your Excellencies, heads of states, heads of governments, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure at the outset to extend my wholehearted thanks to the Republic of Kenya, the government of Kenya, and the people of Kenya, and President William Ruto for this gracious invitation to attend this meeting. Would like to thank you for the excellent hospitality, and would like to thank you for all sorts of efforts and generosity for the sake of the success of this great event, which is the Climate Summit in Africa. And our Saharan Republic also is facing the climate change like so many other countries in the world. We're facing all these challenges related to climate change. Meanwhile, We have another struggle to put an end to occupation in my countries due to the occupation because of the conflict with Morocco. And those challenges are intertwined. This situation led to the displacement of more than 200,000 of our citizens to some territories that are suffering from climate problems, and temperature in the refugees camps are immeasurable. In our occupied territories, the different practices of occupation, which is outside the control of the international law, without any kind of control. It leads to the aggravation against climate change, like, for instance, the problems with fishery, and this depletes our water and agricultural resources for the sake of exports. And this kind of military occupation is sort of a wall and divides our country into two parts. And this deprives the occupied territories from water. And this is a very dangerous environmental deterioration, and this increases drought in our region. It also led to so many deeply rooted changes in the surface of the land, which became more exposed to wind erosion and also water stagnation. There are also mined areas along this wall became inhabitable, and also it has a very limited economic production. Those challenges, huge challenges, required practical measures on our side to deal with the situation. And in this context, we developed our NDC, and we identified through it the urgent measures for adaptation with climate change and mitigation of its limits. And we did that through strengthening development, which is based on renewables instead of fossil energy. And we supported NDC by having an NAP or NAP through the common ministerial initiatives that included several ministries. In the Sahrawi refugees camps, we developed agricultural systems to reduce the use of water. We also developed modern means with lower costs for housing. And the purpose of that is to face the increasing risks of floods, in addition to the spread out of using solar energy in small units. We also have experienced some electricity projects using solar energy, wind energy, and we're using it also in medical facilities in remote and isolated areas. There we use solar energy. Mr. President, although we have a desert nature, but we do have so many resources to provide to the blue economy in Africa. We have long coasts, and it's very good for fisheries. And our coast, which goes as far as 1,110 kilometers, the land there is known for its resources, and of course it's adopted by Ramsar Convention. Those areas are Wadi Saqiya, Bujdur, Dakhla Bay, and Sabkha Imlili. And although all those resources are exposed to climate change, because of the excessive depletion of those resources under occupation, but our country emphasizes that it's committed to execute and implement cautious plans in this area. And this is in harmony with the African initiatives and its goals to protect the African coasts in Africa. In addition to our work or setting out administrative plans for the important environmental areas, and according to the climate change requirements, we're going to work with other countries and have partnerships and with those countries and African organizations to build our national capacities and to exchange experience in relation to the blue economy. The delay of the termination of the occupation by the United Nations, which is the last in Africa, that doesn't mean that we are fully participation in the international global efforts to face climate change and its detrimental impacts. It is illogical that we're deprived of getting the required and allocated financing to face climate change, and we're also deprived of the technical assistance through the climate change mechanism under the United Nations and other organizations. We cannot be deprived from our rights and duty to take part with Africa and the world in this kind of efforts against climate change. And also, we have been coexisting for years and years with those dire and difficult climate circumstances like other countries. We should be represented in the new FCCC and also in the COP. And also we should sign also the Paris agreement and take part in the negotiations, and to also adopt our NDC regularly to the UNFCCC. Our voice is and will be an African voice, and it's going to support the African voice and stance. Sustainable development and the management of blue economy in Africa is strongly related to the way we use to respond to climate change, and we are ready to contribute with our brothers and sisters in Africa and the whole world to achieve the best results and outcomes. I wish you all the best in this summit, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Gali, for that statement. Now it's my humble duty to request His Excellency Evariste Ndayishimiye, President of Burundi, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mheshimiwa Ruto, na hongera sana kwa maandalizi mazuri ya mkutano huyu. I
want to thank God for having given us this very beautiful continent and many opportunities for development. Excellency William Samuel Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, our host, Excellencies, heads of state and government present, the representatives of international and regional organizations, all protocols observed. At the outset, may I thank President Samuel Ruto, the government and people of Kenya for the warm welcome accorded to us. I also congratulate the government of Kenya and the African Union on the excellent organization of this summit, which is being held at the appropriate time. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change is one of the greatest collective threats to mankind. In Burundi, the impact of climate change, mainly through drought and torrential rains, violent winds, floods, and landslides are the major factors of displacement of people. To this, we have to add the rising of the Lake Tanganyika and the growing land degradation, which push families to fight about the remaining fertile land. According to the findings, the annual loss in Burundi is estimated at $100 million. In these losses, 72% because of flood, 5% because of torrential rain, and 40% of violent winds. Thus, these weather vagaries, in fact, lead to $70 million of loss, and it impacts on the well-being of the peoples, their livelihoods, provoke the destruction of human habitat as well as infrastructures, the proliferation of and the spread of diseases and loss in human life. Over the past 20 years, the 1,001 hills of Burundi are exposed to the impact of climate change. Burundi was used to having rainfall of 9 months, but today drought has even grown beyond 4 months, with an unusual season and rhythm of seasons that affect agricultural productivity as well as animal husbandry. Burundi has increased the number of initiatives in order to face this phenomenon. Burundi is in line with all the conventions that relate to climate change. In this regard, Burundi has adopted an environment code in 2021, and one of the policies for environmental orientations taking into account climate change. This program is accompanied by the mobilization of farmers and by putting, that is, the planting of trees in fertile arable lands in order to retain the rain water. Burundi prepared in 2021 its nationally determined contribution, operational plans for adaptation plans also adopted, and according to Article 4, Paragraph 9 of Article 4 of the Paris Declaration. At the practical level, Burundi is mobilizing regularly youth on vacation in preparing the nurseries for agroforestry and forestry seedlings, and to plant them during the period of reforestation, and also to have a program that is Burundi since 2018 wants to rehabilitate the degraded forest lands. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Burundi has the ambition by 2040 wants to develop its objectives of development and the protection of environment and the enhancement of resilience to climate change. According to these perspectives, there are many projects that are envisaged in order to consider a climate resilient program. The establishment of agropoles, hydroelectric centers using photovoltaic cells, and the removal and the processing of waste, and through technological innovation that are adapted to the agricultural and situations where you will have fuel, wood, and other natural gas and biogas which were going to be used. As you know, Africa is bearing the burden of the impact of climate change, although it contributes less than 4% of global warming and emissions. Therefore, there is an urgent appeal to the developed countries to honor their commitments in Paris, made in Paris, and to work in favor of the developing countries in order to mitigate the climate change and also ensure the transition towards a green climate. To conclude, we reiterate our commitment to the Paris Declaration and also the plan of action of 2022 to 2032 of Africa as regards climate change and also resilient development. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your comments. Another round of applause for President Evariste Ndayishimiye. Let me now take this opportunity to request the Vice President of Angola, my dear sister, to come and make her statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excelência William Samoei Ruto,
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. William Samoei Ruto, Your Excellency, Mr. Azali Assoumani, Chair of the African Union, Your Excellency, Mr. Moussa Faki, the Chair of the African Union Commission, Your Excellencies, First Ladies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Allow me, Your Excellencies, to present to you, first of all, the regard of His Excellency, Mr. João Lourenço, the President of the Republic of Angola, whom I have the honor of representing in this August summit, attended by member states with the aim of contributing to finding durable solutions to address global challenges related to the climate change on our continent. We would like to take advantage of this opportunity to applaud the government of Kenya for the warm welcome I received as well as the warm welcome to the Angolan delegation. We would like to applaud the African Union for this important initiative. We would also like to applaud His Excellency William Ruto, the President of Kenya, who is the coordinator of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government for Climate Change, for incentivizing member states to contribute for the process of green transformation of the continent and for the development of the continent's human and natural resources. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, about half a century ago, the environment came to the center of the development of human development. Just like other regions, Africa has been affected by the global shocks, including the global financial crisis, the increasingly growing impact of climate change, and of extreme weather events such as floods and droughts, which amount to a threat to the African economies, which has had a negative impact on the implementation of the different national programs, and which has been preventing us from achieving our sustainable development goals. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the President of the Republic of Angola, João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, continues to prioritize issues related to climate change through the National Program for Sustainable Development 2022 to 2027, which has defined as a priority food security, family agriculture, local development and adaptation to climate change, the education, health, for greater development of human capital, the creation of inclusive employment, as well as modernization and expansion of national infrastructures, both port and road infrastructures, the development of industrial centers to support the diversification of our economy and sustainable growth. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is a continent rich in opportunities where women and youth are some of the greatest producers of food supplies. Therefore, we must fund initiatives and projects that involve women and youth. We need to finance green employment for the youth in order to increase and strengthen the adaptation and resilience of our communities and promote sustainable development. Angola is fully committed with the implementation of the UN Framework for Climate Change. For that reason, we have been implementing policies and action plans such as the National Strategy for Climate Change 2022-2035. This strategy aims to address the challenges launched by the Paris Agreement and to assure the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as establish the vision of the African policy for the Angolan policy for 2035. Out of its own initiative, the Republic of Angola is developing a diversified energy program, and today it incentivizes energy transition for clean and renewable energies through the implementation of two projects, which is the project of the photovoltaic panel, which will be producing 235 megawatts, which will help reduce the impact of the greenhouse gas emission to the tune of 935,000 tons a year. We are also building 5 photovoltaic parks in 5 provinces in Angola. When it comes to adaptation to climate change, we have been implementing mitigation activities to help mitigate the impact of the drought in Angola. The country has invested more than $130 million for the construction of the Kafu Channel, an infrastructure that will bring water to the communities affected by the drought, as well as to support agricultural activities, in this way building the resilience of our rural communities. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge that the road is long. With regards to technological solutions and innovative solutions for climate challenges, the responsible, sustainable production and consumption. On that end, we are working with the African Group, implementing initiatives that will allow us to honor international commitments, especially when it comes to increasing and ensuring that at least 70% of our energy comes from renewable sources by 2035. Ladies and gentlemen, the damage and the losses Africa is suffering as a result of climate change are high. They have been contributing for social instability. They have been contributing to mass displacement and have been contributing to the existence of conflicts. Angola, therefore, calls for a fairer and more equitable global partnership. Angola believes that the investment in climate projects in Africa will not only benefit African nations, but will contribute for global climate stability. We must act fast. And to conclude, I would like to thank everyone who helped organize the summit. And I would like to reiterate the commitment of Angola towards equality, resilience, and towards everything related to the progress of our beloved Africa. I would like to reiterate our trust in the African Union and in the international community so that together we can face challenges associated with climate change. Together we can overcome the obstacles and build a better future for our communities, for Africa, and for the world. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Another round of applause for Angola. Thank you very much. Let me now take this opportunity with all humility to ask President Ismail Omar Guelleh, the President of Djibouti, to make his statement. Your Excellency.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, President Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, may I thank the President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto, and the brotherly people of Kenya for the warm welcome accorded to us since our arrival in this beautiful city of Nairobi. It is a real pleasure for me to take the floor at this forum, which is in line with our strategic thought and dialogue and exchange of views for the sustainable development of our continent through the potential which a blue economy affords us. The Republic of Djibouti subscribes to the Moroni Declaration and the strategy of coordination for a mechanism of the coastal countries which alone encompass 13,000 kilometers. Our country is partly desert country and affected by climate change, and this has been imposed also on us. That is why the tertiary economy occupies 87%, while 3% only is for other components. In fact, we have a very important part played in our economy by the port and the sea. In fact, seawater has enabled us to resolve the problem of access to drinking water, and Djibouti has realized its first regime of desalination. That is to say that the development of blue economy is an imperative need for Djibouti, and it is in this spirit that we have worked out a national strategy for blue economy in 2023, and the national vision is the guiding principle for the action of the government. Its partners and the civil society in working in the maritime economy. In fact, we have worked out a 5-year strategy as well as a plan for implementation of a blue economy, and both are aligned to the strategy and the plan for blue economy and the strategy of IGAD for blue economy and inclusive sustainable economy that can contribute significantly to the transformation of the Horn of Africa. The other sectors identified, that in addition to the port and maritime activities, are fishery and aquaculture, and also the maritime security and safety. We have renewable energy and telecommunications through the submarine and the sea cables. Mr. President, the oceans transcend the states and they connect all of them, and we should harness this potential in order to create wealth. This is the essential of what it means to develop a blue economy, that is to establish partnerships that will enable us to make use and exploit our oceans, and also a paradigm for action leading to sustainable development. That is why the strategy of blue economy should depend on 3 principles: enhancement of economic activities and the maritime activities, the safeguard of natural resources and ecosystem services, and the establishment and the creation of sustainable jobs and growth. We have to ensure that oceans create opportunities for our peoples. More than 80% of the people of Djibouti live on the coast. That is why we think that inclusiveness, ownership, and the empowerment of the coastal people and communities are essential for the implementation of blue economy before we can think of other world supply chains. We need to guarantee the local capacity, legitimize, regulate, and establish opportunities. Mr. President, the awareness of the possibilities of the oceans by our societies and also is associated to sensitization about the various threats and also the threat to maritime and climate change, because this can unleash a dynamic for a better system of protection and sustainable use of marine resources. The preservation and protection of our oceans will guarantee the sustainability of our planet. And this preservation should be accompanied by action, that is, to fight against inequalities and the harmful practices that impede and affect the governance of oceans. Illegal fishing, commercial, unlimited commercial and industrial fishing, the dumping in the toxic waste in our oceans are major risks to our planet. This conference should, in fact, be the point of departure for the trajectory of development of our oceans and seas. We are aware of the African potential as regards blue economy, but also our vulnerability. That is, to unleash the potential of blue economy will regenerate in Africa and beyond, and will demand the mobilization of adequate financial resources, because the capacities of our states to take advantage of blue economy remains inadequate. In spite of many commitments made by the international community as regards adaptation to climate change and increase and enhance resilience, our achievements in fact remain below what is expected and what is demanded. That is why Africa continues to urge our partners to develop and honor their commitments, because the development of blue economy is in line with the spirit of sustainability and resilience that is recommended by Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, and is a breath of oxygen for our countries and for our deserts. I thank you.
Another round of applause for President Ismail Omar of Djibouti. Let me now take this opportunity to invite the Vice President of Namibia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, Head of State and Government, Ministers, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to extend warm greetings from the Republic of Namibia, specifically from Dr. Hage Gottfried Geingob, President of the Republic of Namibia, to you, President William Ruto, for your excellent leadership in the fight against climate change and for hosting this very important and timely summit on climate change. I further extend my gratitude to you and to the people of Kenya for the excellent way this summit has been organized and the warm hospitality extended to my delegation since our arrival in this beautiful city of Nairobi. As Your Excellency have said, I'm finally happy to have returned home to East Africa. Today, I wish to shed light on the effect and impact of climate change on Namibia and her people. Namibia's geographical location in southwest corner of Africa, with its vast desert landscape and arid climate, make it particularly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. Rising temperatures, erratic rainfall patterns, and prolonged droughts are becoming more frequent and tense, wreaking havoc on the country's economy, on our environments, and of course, affecting our people. Agriculture, a cornerstone of Namibia's economy, is significantly affected. Prolonged droughts and unpredictable rain patterns lead to the reduced crop yields, livestock losses, and increased vulnerability to food insecurity. As a result, farmers struggle to provide for their families and to contribute to the nation's food production. The impact on rural community is thus severe, exacerbating poverty and inequality. Moreover, climate change exacerbates the water scarcity challenges facing our country. With limited freshwater resources and a growing population, the demand for water is increasingly high. However, as temperature rises and rainfall becomes erratic, rivers and water bodies dry up and groundwater reserves deplete. This scarcity not only affects drinking water availability, but also impact on agriculture, industrial activities, and hydropower generation. The water crisis strains communities, hinders economic development, and threatens social and communal stabilities. Your Excellencies, these challenges are not unique only to Namibia, as the whole continent experience similar, if not worse, consequences of climate change. We need to be clear in our message to the international community as it relates to what some refer to as climate injustice or climate justice. The global response to the effect of climate change in Africa should be characterized by agency, collaboration, and support. Africa, as a continent, is particularly vulnerable to the impact of climate change, despite contributing minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions. Developed nations must fulfill their commitment to provide financial and technical assistance to African countries. Adequate funding is crucial to support adaptation and mitigation efforts, improving structural resilience, and promote sustainable development. Technology transfer and capacity building initiatives can empower African nations to implement climate-friendly solutions and maximize their potential for clean energy generation and sustainable agriculture. As Africans, we need a stronger voice, unity, and wield more international influence to bring around the necessary change on the continent for the betterment of our people if we want to realize, and I quote, the Africa we want, in line with Agenda 2063. By working together, we can build a more resilient Africa, mitigate the impact of climate change, and ensure a sustainable future for the continent and all its people. I'm therefore positive that through the Nairobi Declaration, we send a clear message to international community, and especially to our partners present here at this conference, that the time to act is now. Merci beaucoup. Obligation. Obrigado. Thank you all. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Now it's my opportunity to request the Vice President of Colombia, my sister, to come and make her remarks. Your Excellency, Madam Vice President. She is the first woman of color to be Vice President of Colombia. Welcome.
Buenas tardes. Saludo al presidente.
I greet the President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto. I greet the excellent President of Comoros, Azali Assoumani, His Excellency Moussa Faki, the President of the African Union Commission, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, all the presidents, leaders, ministers, the media, and all those present here. In first place, I wish to thank the President Ruto for having invited Colombia to participate in this great summit on climate here in this African continent. I come sent by the President Gustavo Petro, who was invited personally by the President of Kenya, and I'd like to thank him for blessing the central discussion that we have today, as that is a call to all of humanity to care for the great challenges, especially this planetary challenge that is putting into risk the life in the planet. As an African descendant woman, I'm very proud to be here in the mother continent. From here, my ancestors came. They were slaves when they left, but today I return as a free woman vice president. And that means that we have done, we have chosen freedom, justice, and dignity as people. It's an honor for me to be here to form part of this very important discussion, and it is the challenge that we have to, and which our nations face, with the climate change. As you have said, Africa is the voice of the planet, but it's also the place where humanity came from. And today, knowing that Africa is giving directions on how to save the big house, the planet. However, it is necessary for this voice to be heard, to be extended to the global south. Today here, Latin America is present, the Caribbeans are present, because we are suffering the same challenges as you are. My country this year, as a government, we have had to face a crisis, a very strong crisis on account of the effects of climate change, floods, which have put in danger the lives of the most vulnerable. But now we have a drought which is starting and which is going to put into danger human life and the life of the fragile ecosystems which form part of this great lung of the world, which is the Amazon and the Pacific region. As we know here, there is another part of this lung of the world, which is the Congo Basin, the region of the Congo, a very strategic region for guaranteeing equilibrium. In this sense, President Gustavo Petro has made several proposals to the world in the United Nations, and today these propositions are placed before you. Whatever has been said today here about how to assume the polycrisis, the different crises that we're experiencing. The crisis of hunger, the crisis of migration, crisis of health, and the pandemic. This is a sign of this planetary crisis, and of the many crises that derive from the impact on the planet of the climate change. And in this sense, therefore, the countries of middle income or the vulnerable countries are the ones that suffer the greatest consequences, as has been said here several times by the speakers. We are not the people responsible for the emissions, but we suffer the greatest consequences of them. And here the problem is a problem of finances. How do we finance the actions that we are carrying out in our countries and in our regions? The real problem is a financial problem. It's not a lack of political will to do something. The real problem is that we don't have the resources, sufficient resources, to look after, to challenge these planetary challenges, to face them. And therefore, we support the proposal of the President of a new reform of the structure of the financial system. We cannot attend this crisis with the same rules and norms of the international financial system, which certainly has a colonial view, or colonialist view, where the rich people sustain themselves in the economy by exploiting the poorer ones. And this colonialist vision will not allow us to challenge the situation that we are experiencing. Therefore, we propose the exchange of debt for climate action. This exchange of debt obviously cannot be in the traditional way as has been done before, because there would not be any just situation. We would not have the sufficient conditions to do properly these exchanges. These exchanges obviously imply special conditions, and one of these proposals is that we should reach agreements, multilateral agreements, to work on this transformation and on the financial system. And in addition, we should together build within this agreement, this multilateral agreement, a plan, an urgent action plan. The planet doesn't have much time. We do not have much time to continue speaking. We have to go into action. And this happens because of political will. The political will of the countries of the North, the G20, who continue emitting gases, but it is not sufficient for us to act in the South if the global North does not take up the challenge of limiting its emission of the gases, as we were saying, as the General Secretary of the United Nations said a few minutes ago. In this sense, therefore, we propose that we should do the same, that what was done in the case of the pandemic. The International Monetary Fund should issue special bonds so that these can contribute to create a global fund to allow the middle-income and vulnerable countries to have the economic conditions to be able to face these challenges. Without this, it would not be possible to advance. Without this commitment to reform the financial system, our countries will continue being drowned in debt, and worse, without getting real responses, solutions to our populations that are dying. As a woman, I celebrate that in this space, in this summit, we are considering the role of women in the policy of life, in this the policy of using our instinct, our maternal instinct, to save our mother, the earth, the bigger uterus. Thank you for this invitation, and I repeat, Colombia expresses its commitment to in climate change and its commitment to strengthen South-South relations with Africa and with the Caribbean, which will allow us to give concrete, specific responses and to this planetary challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my sister Francia, for that candid statement. And by the way, Francia has a Kenyan name. She's called Nyawira. And when she came to Kenya, we traced her origin to a place called Meru. So thank you very much, Nyawira. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. A round of applause for Nyawira, Francia. Thank you very much. Now, let me take this opportunity to request my brother, the Prime Minister from DRC, to make his comments briefly, because we've really overshot the runway. Your Excellency, please.
Excellence William Ruto,
Excellency William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and host of this summit. Excellencies, heads of state and government, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, Mr. Moussa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to take the floor on this day on behalf of His Excellency Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, on the occasion of this African Climate Summit in this magnificent and beautiful Kenya International Conference Center. Like those who took the floor before me, I would like to thank the Republic of Kenya, the sister republic, for the warm welcome accorded to my delegation, and I would like to extend this gratitude on behalf of the President of the DRC. Organizing the thing that is to develop positive solutions for climate in favor of Africa and the world. This summit affords my country the opportunity to meet the expectations as regards the problem of climate, and precepts are based on three fundamental principles, that is a green economy, biodiversity, and renewable energy. As we can not overemphasize that the DRC is a kind of solution country which imposes on the world because of its potential and innumerable assets, which is an undeniable contribution that is there for the conservation of nature. A favorable ecosystem, our country in fact has huge forest resources and 155.5 million hectares, which is more than 10% of the forests of the Congo Basin, an important reserve and a well of more than 30 gigaton of carbon, and also its potential of the solar energy, which represents 37.7% of Africa and the world. The Democratic Republic of the Congo can, through its hydroelectric power, can provide and supply Africa with this energy, and also its young population, its labor force, and which is a great potential. And as President Ruto has said earlier on, the African potential is known. Here, it is a question of transforming this potential and harness this potential in responding to the issues of climate. We, last year, had a crisis, the fact of the deregulation of the wells and the dry season, which, in fact, had a lean corn season in East Africa, in Central Africa, as well as Southern Africa. And this has destabilized our economies. This has made us more aware of the response that we should give to this climate problem. For me, and the response of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there are three indispensable ingredients. One is the will, solidarity, and determination. The will is through the honoring of commitments that we make, particularly the countries that pollute, and as regards the carbon tax, as agreed at the COP15, will on financing, innovative financing, and financing green economy, as agreed at the last summit in Paris. And then the investment on energy, the development of value chains here in Africa, and this with a response for jobs for our youth, and the will to enable us, as it has been said here, that is access to financing on fair and equitable conditions, and the reduction of debt of the vulnerable economies through compensation, because it has also been proposed and I think it has to be recalled. And the second ingredient is solidarity. Solidarity as regards projects of common interest. I'm here thinking of and referring to energy, green energy, the needs in energy and the peoples who live in the forest, and also thinking of the Inga Dam and integrating a project. And we are open to proposals so that we need the efforts of each and every one. I can give another example, the agreement between the DRC and Zambia on the development of value chains, solidarity on issues of common interest, as is the case like the Congo Basin, the Amazon, and the Mekong Basin, as called by President Denis Sassou Nguesso. And then solidarity as regards peace and security in order to guarantee the protection of forests, biodiversity, which has been destroyed by various criminal activities. Then determination, which is the third ingredient, in the search for innovative solutions to climate, as it is the case here in Kenya, and then the determination for a better world to be bequeathed to our children, and also the new climate economy, and access to conservation and the rehabilitation and restoration of our forests for the production of, and then regenerative agriculture, and also to ensure food security. It is for this reason that we are in favor of the establishment of a fund for climate change. We also are making an advocacy, and we want to do it on the margins of the UN General Assembly, which will be organized on 19 September, on a carbon market that will be profitable for Africa, and that will be on the margins of that summit. So all these issues, we show solidarity, and this should apply not only to Africa but also beyond. I sincerely want to thank President Ruto and all the participants for this opportunity that is afforded to us through this summit, which will contribute undoubtedly to all the meetings on climate. I want to thank you all.
Thank you very much, my brother Sama, for your comments. And another round of applause for my brother Sama. Let me ask that we now prepare the clip from my sister Motley. Just hold it as I give the floor very briefly, maybe 2-3 minutes, to the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Salah Jama from Somalia, if he is there. Okay, if he's not there, can we take the clip from my sister, Mia Motley?
Your Excellency President Ruto of Kenya, Your Excellency Azal Assoumani, President of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, I'd like to thank you for co-hosting such an important summit. Thank you also to Your Excellency UN Secretary General, my dear friend and brother, Antonio Guterres, and to Presidents, Honourable Ministers and everyone present for contributing to this remarkable occasion. We are gathered here today for what is truly an important summit, not just for Africa, but for the entire world. And while I do wish I could join you in person today, please accept my participation by way of this message as I bring this from you from my own shores here in Barbados. President Ruto, you know that Kenya is one of my favorite places, and if I could be there, I would be there. My friends, so many people across the globe are now imperiled and impacted by the climate crisis and the interconnected impacts that take place, such as pollution and deforestation. The world has discussed and debated all of this. But the fact is that for too long, we have done far too little. And as I said in Paris, we're not moving at the pace or with the scope that is necessary to tackle the environmental decline if we are to safeguard our people and our planet. The climate crisis affects everybody, but particularly it has devastating consequences, life and death consequences, for the very poorest and most vulnerable. And they come from countries who didn't help cause it. But my friends, we still have a choice. We can continue to talk amongst each other, seeking perfection or even casting blame, while the world literally burns. Or we can choose to transform our future. We can choose to shape it. To do so, we've said all along, we need to take action now, and at the pace and the scope that matters. And why with such urgency? We now live in a world of superlatives. I call it the season of superlatives, the hottest, the rainiest, the warmest. Everything is breaking new barriers and new records for the Guinness Book of World Records. And yet every day we continue to do nothing or enough as we see the impacts of the climate crisis. We need to stop talking and we need to do. The Bridgetown Initiative is an action plan that we've identified to make the world a better place only because we live in a world where capitalism and money dominate so much that unless we unlock the financing mechanisms, we're not going to be able to take the necessary action at scale and with speed. At its core, the Bridgetown Initiative sets out how we can rebuild the international financial architecture to be fit for purpose, so that countries like ours and yours are no longer disadvantaged by systems that were not built with us in mind when they were established. Now is the time to do what needs to be done. There's no other word. N-O-W, a simple three-letter word, now. We are at the crossroads for humanity. And this, my friends, is a time when political will, matched by the recognition of our reality, will make all the difference in the world. I know that many of us recognize this who are there today at this Africa Summit. Your countries and your people continue, like mine and ours in the Caribbean and across SIDS, to face the brutal effects of this climate crisis. And we also face, of course, that climate financing gap that is limiting your ability to respond effectively. This cannot and this should not be. Brothers and sisters, I say to you today that it is up to everyone to do all they can to ensure the continued health of our nations. We must work together from the African continent to the Caribbean. Understanding nature and the climate crisis does not respect the boundaries which man holds fast to as borders. Indeed, I say now it doesn't matter because we're seeing it in the north, in the east, the west, and the south. We must stand up for what is right. We must share a sense of responsibility to our environment and indeed to the loss of biodiversity on land and in our oceans. We must share a sense of responsibility to each and every generation. We, my friends, are capable of achieving common goals, but we can only do so when we share that sense of responsibility to one another. We must be our brothers and sisters' keepers, and we must look to treat others as we would wish to be treated. If we apply these simple precepts that our children live by daily, then I believe that we can begin to see success. I trust that the science will continue to be all at the center of all that we do, and I trust, therefore, that that ability to link science with finance, with public policy action, can make the difference to ordinary people in Nairobi, ordinary people in Bridgetown, ordinary people wherever they are found on this planet. Thank you, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much, my sister Motley, wherever you are, and for your very kind comments. Let me now take this opportunity to ask the Deputy Prime Minister from Somalia, Mr. Jama, to make your statement, and I request my brother to make it brief. Thank you. Thank you for understanding.
President. Your Excellency, President William Ruto, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow leaders from Africa and around the world. On behalf of the President of Somalia, Dr. Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, and the people of Somalia, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks to the President of Kenya for convening this very timely inaugural African Climate Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, across the African continent, from the southern tip to the northern edge of the Sahara, from the Sahel to the Horn, the impact of climate change manifests itself in some very similar, cyclical, and destructive patterns. And it's this common threat that brings us all together to form a unified voice championed by President Ruto. Ladies and gentlemen, Somalia, located in the Horn of Africa, is acutely aware of the profound weight of climate change vulnerabilities. Rising temperatures are very common in Somalia, and the predictions state that by 2040-2060, the temperature will increase by 1 to 1.7 degrees Celsius. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to highlight a set of variables that interact together and render the African states extremely vulnerable and their communities. The era of climate change has become synonymous with the nexus of food insecurity, forced migration, and displacement, coupled with conflict. It has been widely stated here today that over 150 million Africans are subject to food insecurity and hunger. Around 60 million of those are in the Eastern Africa and the Horn region, and 5 million in Somalia. Since much of the African countries are not industrial states, climate change impact affects us at our most vulnerable places. In places like Somalia, pastoral communities and agrarian communities are the most hard hit. So today's very proud livestock herder or a farmer could overnight find themselves in an IDP camp outside the big cities, becoming another added number to climate change vulnerabilities. I would like to allude to an element of combating climate change that has not been widely discussed in this plenary today, and that is our coastlines and the blue economy that President Gayle spoke about. Somalia has the longest coastline in the mainland continent, but overall in Africa, our blue economy is underperforming, and rising water levels, extinction of coral reefs and mangroves, and biodiversity is an imminent threat. For the ocean gives us more than 50% of the oxygen that we consume. Ladies and gentlemen, Somalia annually loses a revenue worth of 300 million to illegal fishing. And I think investment in the sector would allow us to enhance our potential to cope with climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, the final question I would like to raise is how well are the African states and societies situated to combat climate change? I think that point has been very well articulated by the previous speakers. The African states have a unique set of challenges that puts them in a precarious situation. Limited fiscal space, changing global markets and volatility, lack of access to finance at a reasonable rate, all these elements compounded, and the climate change diverts the African states from investing in development and sustainable development goals, and on a regular basis focus on humanitarian interventions. Such an approach should be abandoned, and we must look for more meaningful engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, When droughts hit California, you do not see the death of people. But when droughts hit the Horn of Africa, you see both the death of people and the loss of livestock. So climate change affects Africa in some very profound and immediate ways. Finally, I fundamentally want to agree with the argument put forth by President Ruto that Africa should be and ought to be part of the solution to combat climate change. We have a very young, vibrant population. More than 70% of our population is young. We have 60% of the world's potential in terms of renewable energy. We have the greatest potential for agriculture and livestock. And instead of the world feeding us, Africa has the potential to feed the world. But for that to happen, there needs to be justice and reform in the global financial institution. If we cannot access finances at a reasonable rate, a rate equal to others, then for us, bringing about a transformation would be an elusive goal. I'll give you the final example of where Somalia stands today. We are fighting a war against Al-Shabaab, Mr. President. That's why our president could not be here. He is in the front lines. We are finalizing a debt relief HIPC initiative that took us almost a decade, serious fiscal limitations. After we complete the fight against Al-Shabaab and we finish our debt relief program, we will find ourselves in a very interesting situation. Do we go for concessional loans to invest in infrastructure, in human capital, in sustainable development goals, or do we deal with the droughts? We almost averted a famine a year ago. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, in the last 30 years, Somalia has experienced 18 droughts, 2 famines, an equal number of floods. In order for us to develop the resilience and the mechanisms to cope with those things and empower our resilient citizens, we ask for international financial institutions to be reformed, adaptation programs to be increased, and Africans should have a common voice so that we can take it to the next scope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. And I want to confirm as a neighbor the whereabouts of the President of Somalia and give him our regards. Let me take this opportunity. The President of Nigeria passed by and did request me to give a chance, a very brief moment, Minister, 2 minutes. Isaac Adenkule, the Minister of State for Environment from Nigeria. If he is in the house, you have the floor. And, oh yeah, thank you. Minister, please make it brief.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I am here to deliver the Nigerian statement on behalf of my President, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is unable to be here because he has to be in New Delhi, India, to be part of the summit of G20 leaders. Your Excellencies, President of the African Union, my brother, the President of Kenya, fellow African presidents, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Excellencies, speaking on behalf of Nigeria, I extend my heartfelt congratulations for the landmark occasion that marks the inaugural AU African Summit. This event, as well as our recent efforts and advocacy on the topic of climate change, boldly demonstrates to the global community that Africa is rising to the challenge and taking decisive steps to deliver a sustainable economic future for our people. The African Climate Summit occurs at a pivotal juncture, offering us an exclusive stage to spotlight our priorities, solutions, and needs regarding climate action to the global community. As a continent, it is critical that climate action spurs socio-economic development for us. We know that with robust planning and increased investment in the region, this is achievable. Africa is already bearing the brunt of a climate crisis that it did not cause. But our continent, with our significant renewable energy resources, critical minerals, vast carbon sink, and growing population, can be a strong solution center. Distinguished participants, in Nigeria, we have articulated our unchanging position to advance climate action without jeopardizing economic development. We designed an ambitious energy transition plan to achieve universal access to energy by 2030 and net zero emission by 2060, while prioritizing industrialization, job creation, and economic growth. Significantly, our plan helps to crystallize the scale of resources needed to deliver climate targets, so that by the current financial flows will not suffice. Nigeria's energy transition plan requires 1.9 trillion in spending up to 2060, including 410 billion above business as usual spending. This is additional financing requirement translates to about 10 billion per annum, but average international financing flows to Nigeria for clean energy have been about 655 million per year over the last decades. Similarly, the unconditional target in our nationally determined contributions requires $7.7 billion in investment annually. In 2019-2020, all sub-Saharan Africa received barely approximately $20 billion USD in climate finance. Annual climate finance flows to Africa are currently just 11% of what we require, so more investment have to come to the continent. For us in Nigeria, we are presently establishing partnerships with both public and private sector players, driving innovative policy changes, advancing renewable energy projects, including on-grid solar and electric vehicle development, and exploring innovative financing mechanisms like carbon trading to lay the foundation for an all-encompassing transition. I recently made public the key focus of my government, captured as an 8-point agenda. Climate action and environmental sustainability is central to achieving 4 of those agendas, which are food security, poverty eradication, sustainable job creation, and security. We recognize that just energy transition partnerships are emerging as an important source of capital for climate-sensitive energy efforts in developing regions, and Nigeria wants to be considered for one. My team is currently working on a proposal to the G7 for the JET-P for Nigeria. It is encouraging that South Africa and Senegal have secured JET-Ps, but they must be scaled up across Africa in addition to other strategic financing opportunities. This summit is essential for highlighting such requests, sharing ongoing efforts, and establishing inter-country collaboration. Mr. President, I assure you and fellow leaders of Nigerian unwavering support as we embark on this journey to clearly communicate Africa's position on climate action and expedite an equitable, sustainable future for all of us. God bless Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. I will extend another 2 minutes to my brother Ban Ki-moon, if he is still in the house. If he is not, then I will request the Honorable Huang Rungui from China, the Minister for Ecology. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Okay.
His Excellency William Ruto, President of Kenya, His Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of Comoros, Ministers, Heads of State, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all. I am very honored on behalf of the Chinese government to be invited to join the Africa Climate Summit to discuss with African leaders, friends and colleagues on climate change and sustainable development. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Government of Kenya and President Ruto Williams to successfully convene this summit. I would like to also thank President Ruto to invite the Chinese government to attend this event. Since the beginning of this year, extreme weather events have occurred frequently around the world. Forest fires in Canada, heat waves and floods in many parts of China, and floods and mudslides in Malawi, among other African states, have caused serious loss of life and property, as well as ecological crisis. Climate change is a global challenge that can only be effectively addressed through solidarity and cooperation. The UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement are hard-won gains, which reflect the greatest global consensus. We should always adhere to the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, equity, and respective capabilities, so as to build a solid political foundation for global climate cooperation. Africa is one of the regions in the world most vulnerable to climate change, which also plays an important role in the climate governance and actions. Faced with the multiple challenges of development, poverty reduction, and climate change, African countries have taken vigorous actions in adaptation and mitigation, and have made great efforts to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement. China, as the largest developing country with over 1.4 billion population, can totally relate to what Africa is experiencing in face of all the challenges. President Xi Jinping has pointed out that addressing climate change is not something that others want us to do, but something we must do. China has set the goal of carbon peaking by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060 as our NDC. China has taken vigorous actions which have led to positive progress. In this regard, China has become an active player to respond to climate change. Over the last decade, China has supported economic growth of over 6% per year, with only an average annual growth of 3% in energy consumption. Thus, the installed capacity of renewables in China is up to over 1.3 billion kilowatts. And China has brought down the global cost of renewables, contributing significantly to the global response to climate change and emission reduction. China has launched a national carbon markets covering 4.5 billion tons of emissions per year. We also produced over half of the global e-mobility vehicles. We have afforested an area of 1.02 billion mu, equivalent to 6.8 million hectares, contributing to a quarter of the world's new forested area. China and Africa has been very effective in climate cooperation in the past 1 decade. We have assisted Africa's low-carbon and climate change adaptation demonstration zones, supported its clean energy infrastructure and smart agriculture, and helped enhance disaster prevention and mitigation in Africa, and also facilitated the implementation of the Great Green Wall program in Africa. In late 2021, China and Africa jointly issued the Declaration on China-Africa Cooperation on Combating Climate Change. As of August 2023, China has signed MOUs with 15 African countries on climate cooperation. I would like to take this opportunity to announce that in order to implement this declaration, China plans to launch the program Africa Solar Belt under the South-South Cooperation on Climate Change to assist relevant African countries in developing and utilizing solar energy, address power shortage, and transition to green and low-carbon development. Development is the way to enable people to live a better life, a top priority for developing countries. Recently, President Xi Jinping has launched new initiatives such as the Support for Africa's Industrialization Initiative and China's plan for the modernization of African agriculture. We are ready to work with African countries to deepen cooperation in climate actions and sustainable development, and to join hands in promoting green, low-carbon modernization. Meanwhile, we also call on developed countries to proactively shoulder their historical responsibility and fulfill their commitment to provide developing countries with at least $100 billion every year in climate finance. As President of CBD COP15, I would like to also call for your attention to the intrinsic linkage between biodiversity and climate change. I have heard a lot of remarks just now which have mentioned the rich biodiversity and forest resources in China. In Africa, containing huge carbon sink. China would like to work with the international community to fully implement the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and to create harmony between man and nature. Finally, I wish this meeting every success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let me now take this opportunity for another 2 minutes to ask my brother Achin Steiner, the UN Undersecretary responsible for UNDP, to make some brief remarks. That is another Kenyan from a place called Nakuru.
Asante sana, Mr. President, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Heads of State and Government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. A great deal has been said this morning, but I'm still inspired, if I may say so, by your speech this morning, Mr. President. And with that, I take a license for a moment to take you back to a year in Kenya's history when you were 15 and I just a little bit older. It was the year that in Olkaria and Hell's Gate National Park, the first geothermal unit was installed. I mention this because the journey of Kenya in so many ways represents, when it comes to the energy sector, to leadership, to transition, to many of the things that you spoke about this morning, reflects what happens when people do not take the answer, it's not possible, it's not doable, it's too expensive, too seriously. Hell's Gate National Park is only about an hour outside Nairobi. Kenyans know it well. Visitors, please visit it because it is today one of the most remarkable places, the backbone of Kenya's electricity generating economy. That first Mitsubishi turbine installed in 1981 was installed against a great deal of skepticism. I learned about this history during the years that I spent here. It took many pioneers to envisage it. Today, Mr. President, I believe that Olkaria, with its various generating turbines, generates almost 1,000 megawatts of electricity. And ladies and gentlemen, you are in a country that may very well become the first country in modern history to actually generate its entire electricity supply with clean energy sources. Kenya today is a country that has passed the 92% mark, and it is no longer alone. In fact, Mr. President, there is another country in South America I visited and I did not know. Uruguay, today, well over 90% of its electricity supply with renewables. This is not to say that every country can follow the same path, but what we do in UNDP, and why I'm so proud to be here together with my Secretary General and so many of the partners that are today invested in precisely the kind of vision that you have laid out for Africa, is that we can be partners. We have listened, we have learned together, and today, as UNDP, 36 countries on the African continent have invited UNDP to help them undertake integrated national financing frameworks to address this continuously frustrating reality that this continent is asked to borrow for things that it was neither responsible for nor it can afford to borrow in this world of today. That is why looking at finance with the kind of lens that you have both spoken to this morning is so important. Secondly, also pioneering projects such as solar mini-grids, another major enterprise of UNDP. For the first time in history, we are supporting 21 African countries to try and connect over the next few years 260 million people to electricity supplies. A $65 billion investment opportunity, but it needs hard work, both to prepare the ground, to find the investors, and to then roll it out. And finally, Mr. President, let me just commit to you, in the presence of so many leaders from across the continent, the United Nations Development Programme, as part of the United Nations family, as you heard from the Secretary General this morning, is deeply committed to Africa's future transitions, coming out of the reality of today, but investing every day across the continent. I'm proud to today lead an organization within our UN development system that is literally present in every African country on this continent. We are invested in terms of your nationally determined contributions. We are invested in your energy transition just as deeply as we're invested in poverty eradication and ultimately a future for Africa that you spoke so eloquently this morning. Thank you so much for the privilege of addressing you today, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Steiner. I guess everybody, when they get a chance, they speak about their village. The Olkaria, where Steiner has very passionately talked about, is in his county of Nakuru. Thank you very much. Now, let me give another 2 minutes. Finally, this is the final one, to Bill Gates on video for 2 minutes, and then we will move the program to the next stage.
Hello. I want to thank President Ruto for convening this event and prioritizing this important work. I started work on climate change over 2 decades ago after I left my full-time work at Microsoft, and I was focusing on fighting poverty and fighting diseases. When I visited Africa, I saw 2 things. First was how climate is already affecting agricultural output, although they've contributed almost nothing to these greenhouse gas emissions because they're dependent on farming, they're near the equator, they're already experiencing more damages than other countries. But I also saw the energy shortage, and we need Africa to have lots and lots of energy to develop their economies. It's fantastic that the African researchers and companies are now thinking about how they can reduce their emissions and continue to grow their economies. Breakthrough Energy is the organization I created to help with climate mitigation. The goal is to innovate, to make the cost of being clean far, far less. And that means we can reduce the emissions and avoid this temperature increase that has such a negative impact. Late last year, I was in a farm in eastern Kenya, and they were experiencing drought. And so I talked through with Mary, who was the farmer, how the new seeds and new approaches were helping her. She had drought-tolerant seeds that made a very big difference. She also had chickens that were bred so they could be more heat-tolerant. And because of those new tools that were empowering her, she was expecting to do well despite the tough climate challenge that she faces. And so this is just one example, but by helping with better tools, allowing farmers like her, who are very innovative, to do new things, we can minimize these damages. I've seen there's African researchers work on innovations in fertilizer, making sure these new crops fit their ecosystems and getting those seeds out, getting them approved, and making sure they're low cost. So we do need to invest, whether it's in the innovation or the deployment, getting resources against those, including the promised support from rich countries, will be very, very important. The global goal on adaptation, which will be finalized at COP, should lead to more investment to help Africa deal with these challenges. And so we need partnerships. We need government, philanthropists, businesses to come together to focus on climate adaptation. Yes, we need mitigation, but adaptation doesn't get the energy it deserves. And so I'm excited that you've come together. I'm excited to work with all of you to solve this problem. So thank you for your efforts.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as we now wait, we're going to take a very short interlude of music. And at this point, can we all just stand up and stretch a little bit? Just stand up wherever you are and see whether we can stretch. I'm sure some of us have been sitting for long, long periods of time. So the next part we're coming to is the new global climate finance architecture. This is a centerpiece and a part that we've been waiting for all this time. And therefore, thank you so much for your patience. You can sit down now. You can take your seats. I just wanted you to stand up and stretch for a little bit. And this is definitely going to be one of the highlights of this whole conference. So we request that we just remain patient, and this is where we are heading from here. So I request that we have a short interlude of music just to get us ready for the next session. As mentioned, it's a new global climate finance architecture that is coming up right here. So for now, let's have the interlude of music as we get ourselves ready. Once you've stretched enough, you may take your seats.
Africa, rise, rise, Bambazuka. Let us all arise, rise, Bambazuka. Africa, rise, rise, Bambazuka. PPMC. Let us all arise, rise, Bambazuka. We are part of the solution. I am part of the solution. We are part of the solution. You are part of the solution. We are part of the solution. I am part of the solution. Africa flows. We have all it takes to change the climate story and show ourselves in all our splendor and glory. Yeah. Let's come together now to bring down all barriers for a greater tomorrow. So Africa, arise.
And I know as I stand here before you, we are actually having all the audience from South Africa all the way to Djibouti, from all the way Mozambique to Morocco, and across Uganda all the way to Nigeria. So this is Africa, and Africa is talking, and they have been heard. We want to thank you most sincerely. As you continue around, we want to say the action is now. We have waited for long. That is what Africa is saying. And thank you so much, and may God bless you.
Asante, let's give a clap to Dr. Chumo and also for Wanjira Mathai for doing a fantastic job. Let's give them a good clap. Asante sana Wanjira, you've taken the sessions very well. At this point, Your Excellency, we are coming near to the end, and I would request if I can just have a photo with the panelists or with Wanjira. So Wanjira, if you can come back, and then I'll request the panelists you're with to come down here, and then you can take one photo. And then secondly, the second one we'll take with the panelists that were taken by Dr. Susan Chomba. So, Adlostia, kindly welcome to the front. Hans, welcome to the front. And also Miss Kristin, welcome to the front. We take one photo, and then we'll be followed by the other panelists, then we close. Your Excellencies, welcome.
Joma beyo, joma chungile, kiti yo matende.